I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him. I simply asked. The question hung in the air longer than it should have, and in that silence, everything began to unravel. My husband avoided my eyes, shifted his weight, and answered with half words that explained nothing. What hurt wasn't the object itself. It was the absence of honesty, the pauses, the way he chose silence over truth. In that moment, I realized that sometimes betrayal isn't revealed by what is said, but by what is carefully left unsaid. If this story helps you recognize that silence can be the loudest confession, or gives you courage to demand honesty even when the truth is painful, please leave a like and subscribe. Your support helps me share stories that matter. There's a particular kind of pain that comes not from what someone tells you, but from what they refuse to say. It's the pain of silence where there should be explanation, of evasion where there should be clarity, of careful word choices designed to obscure rather than illuminate truth. I experienced that pain on a rainy Wednesday afternoon in March, standing in my kitchen holding a credit card statement, asking my husband a simple question about an unexplained charge for $5,000, and watching him choose silence and half-truths over the honesty I deserved. That conversation, or more accurately, that non-conversation, became the moment when my marriage began its slow, inevitable collapse, not because of what was said, but because of everything that was deliberately left unsaid. My name is Vanessa Chen, and I'm 42 years old. The incident I'm describing happened 18 months ago, when I was 40 and had been married to my husband James for 16 years. We'd met in our mid-20s through work, both of us in finance, both ambitious and career-focused, both looking for partners who understood the demands of our professional lives. Our relationship progressed logically and predictably through the expected stages. Dating, moving in together, getting engaged, planning a wedding that was elegant but not extravagant, settling into married life with careers and a nice home and all the markers of success. James worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm, managing portfolios for high-net-worth clients, making excellent money, building a career that was steady and respected. I worked as a portfolio manager at an investment company, also making good money, also building professional credibility and success. We were, by external measures, a power couple, dual income, no kids by choice, living in a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood, traveling internationally, accumulating wealth and experiences. From the outside, our life looked enviable, and for many years I believed it actually was. Our marriage wasn't passionate or particularly emotionally intimate, but I'd convinced myself that was normal for long-term relationships, especially for two people as busy and career-focused as we were. We were partners in building a life, companions in our day-to-day existence, allies in navigating the professional and social worlds we inhabited. We had separate interests. James golfed and collected wine. I did yoga and volunteered with a women's professional network, and we gave each other space to pursue those interests independently. I thought this was healthy, this maintenance of individual identities within a marriage. I didn't realize it was actually distance masquerading as independence. We maintained separate bank accounts in addition to a joint account for household expenses, something we'd established early in our relationship when we were both fiercely independent and wanted to maintain financial autonomy. We each contributed equally to the joint account for mortgage, utilities, groceries, shared expenses, and what we did with our individual money was our own business. This arrangement had always worked fine. We trusted each other, didn't monitor each other's spending, operated on the assumption that we were both responsible adults managing our finances appropriately. That assumption was challenged on a Wednesday afternoon in March when I was working from home and decided to reconcile our credit card statements with our budget spreadsheet, something I did quarterly to make sure we were staying on track with our financial goals. I pulled up the statement for our joint credit card, the one we used for household purchases and shared expenses, and started going through the charges line by line. Most were routine and expected: grocery stores, utilities, gas stations, restaurants where we'd eaten together, home improvement stores for recent house projects. Then I saw it, a charge for $5,000 to a company called Discretion Boutique, dated from 2 weeks earlier. I stared at the charge, trying to remember what it could possibly be for. $5,000 was not an insignificant amount, and I had no memory of us making any purchase from a company with that name. I searched my email for receipts or confirmations, thinking maybe James had ordered something for the house without mentioning it, but found nothing. I looked up Discretion Boutique online and found a website for what appeared to be a high-end lingerie and adult boutique, selling luxury intimate wear, sex toys, and other products aimed at enhancing sexual experiences. My stomach dropped. Why would there be a $5,000 charge from a lingerie boutique on our joint credit card? I definitely hadn't made any such purchase. I bought my underwear from department stores, practical and comfortable rather than expensive or exotic. And $5,000 seemed like an astronomical amount to spend at such a store regardless. I sat staring at the charge for several minutes, my mind racing through possibilities, trying to find an innocent explanation, but coming up empty. When James came home from work that evening, I'd been sitting with the credit card statement for hours, my anxiety building, trying to decide how to approach this. I didn't want to be accusatory or assume the worst, but I also couldn't ignore a $5,000 unexplained charge. I waited until after dinner, until we were both settled in the living room with our evening routine. Him with a glass of wine reading the news on his tablet, me supposedly reading a book, but actually rehearsing in my mind how to bring this up. "James," I said, keeping my voice neutral and calm, "I was going through our credit card statement today and I saw a charge I don't recognize. Can you help me understand what it's for?" He looked up from his tablet, his expression mildly curious but not concerned. "What charge?" he asked. I pulled out the printed statement I'd been carrying with me, pointed to the line item for Discretion Boutique. "This one, $5,000. I don't remember us buying anything from this company." I watched his face carefully as he looked at the statement, and what I saw was immediate recognition followed quickly by something that looked like panic, then a carefully constructed mask of casual dismissal. The entire sequence took maybe 3 seconds, but it told me everything I needed to know. He knew exactly what that charge was for, and he didn't want to tell me. "Oh, that," he said, his tone attempting lightness, but not quite achieving it. It's for a client gift. One of my high-net-worth clients had a milestone birthday, and I wanted to send something special." The explanation sounded rehearsed, too smooth, delivered with the careful precision of someone who's anticipated being asked this question and prepared an answer. "A client gift from a lingerie boutique?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "That seems unusual and expensive?" James shrugged, not meeting my eyes, his attention seemingly back on his tablet, though I could tell he wasn't actually reading. "It's a specialty store. They have more than just lingerie. They have robes and luxury bath products and things like that. This client has very specific tastes, and I wanted something that would impress him." Everything about his answer felt wrong. The avoidance of eye contact, the vagueness about what specifically was purchased, the characterization of a lingerie boutique as carrying generic luxury items, the casual dismissal of $5,000 as a normal client gift expenditure. "What specifically did you buy?" I asked. "And which client is this for? That's a very significant amount of money for a client gift. Does your firm reimburse you for that?" James shifted in his chair, his discomfort now obvious. "I don't remember the specific items," he said, "and the client prefers to remain private. You know how it is with high-net-worth individuals. They value discretion. That's why the store is called Discretion Boutique." The explanation was getting weaker, more transparent in its evasion. "James," I said more firmly now, "I need you to be honest with me. A $5,000 charge from a lingerie boutique is not normal. It's not something I can just accept without understanding what it's actually for. So I'm asking you directly, what did you buy, and why?" The silence that followed my question lasted maybe 15 seconds, but it felt eternal. James sat completely still, his eyes fixed on his tablet, his jaw clenched, clearly struggling with how to respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight and defensive. "Why are you interrogating me about this? We have separate finances. What I spend my money on is my business." I felt my anger rising at this deflection. "This was charged to our joint credit card, not your personal account. So it is actually our business, not just yours. And I'm not interrogating you. I'm asking a straightforward question that you're refusing to answer straightforwardly." Another long silence. James set down his tablet, ran his hand through his hair, still not looking at me. "I don't want to talk about this right now," he said. I've had a long day and I'm tired. Can we discuss it another time? The request to postpone was itself an answer. If there was an innocent explanation, he would have given it immediately, eager to clear up the misunderstanding. The fact that he wanted to delay, to have time to construct a better story or decide how much to reveal, confirmed that something was very wrong. No, I said firmly. We can't discuss it another time. We need to discuss it now. I'm asking you a direct question and I deserve a direct answer. What was the $5,000 charge from Discretion Boutique for? James stood abruptly, his frustration evident. Jesus, Vanessa, why can't you just trust me? I told you it was a client gift. Why do you need every detail? Why do you need to know every single thing I do? His deflection to my supposed lack of trust, his framing of my reasonable question as unreasonable suspicion, was a classic manipulation tactic, and it made me even more certain he was hiding something. I do trust you, I said, though even as I said it, I realized it was no longer entirely true. But trust doesn't mean accepting explanations that don't make sense without asking follow-up questions. The charge is from a lingerie boutique, not a general gift store. The amount is significant. Your explanation is vague and you're refusing to provide any specific details. Those facts make me concerned, and I'm asking you to help me understand so I don't have to be concerned. James stood there in our living room, his back partially turned to me now, his whole body radiating tension and defensiveness. I waited for him to say something, anything, that would make this make sense. Instead, he said, I need some air. I'm going for a drive. And he left, walking out of the house without another word, leaving me standing there with the credit card statement in my hand and a growing certainty that my marriage was built on lies I was only beginning to uncover. He didn't come home that night. He texted around 11 saying he'd gotten a hotel room and needed space to think, that we'd talk tomorrow. I lay awake in our bed, my mind racing through possibilities. Was James having an affair? Was the charge for lingerie he'd bought for another woman? But $5,000 seemed excessive even for affair gifts. What could possibly cost that much at a lingerie store? Was he involved in something else? Something I couldn't even imagine? The not knowing was torture, but what was worse was the certainty that James knew exactly what the charge was for and was choosing not to tell me. The next day, Thursday, James came home around noon. I'd called in sick to work, unable to focus on anything except this crisis in my marriage. We sat down at the kitchen table, and I tried again. I need you to be honest with me, I said. Whatever the truth is, whatever you spent that money on, I need to know. The lying and evasion is worse than whatever you're hiding. James looked tired, like he hadn't slept either. I wasn't lying, he said. I didn't want to get into it because I knew you'd overreact. Overreact to what? I asked. James, just tell me the truth. What did you buy? Another long pause. Then finally he said, I bought some items for myself. Personal items. Things I wanted to explore privately without judgment. The admission was vague but suggestive, and my mind immediately went to possibilities I hadn't considered. Was this about his sexuality? His sexual preferences? Was he exploring aspects of himself I didn't know about? What kinds of items? I asked gently, trying to be open and non-judgmental, even though I was hurt by the secrecy. I'm not going to judge you, James. I just need to understand what's going on. He shook his head. It's private. It's my business. I don't want to discuss it in detail. The refusal to be specific, even now after I'd directly asked and tried to create a safe space for honesty, felt like another betrayal. We're married, I said, frustration creeping into my voice. We're supposed to share our lives, including parts that feel private or vulnerable. If you're exploring something about yourself, you should be able to talk to me about it. I can't, James said, his voice flat. I'm not ready to talk about it. I may never be ready. I need you to accept that there are parts of my life that are just mine and that you don't get to know about. I sat back, stunned by this declaration. That's not how marriage works, I said. You don't get to spend $5,000 of our joint money on secret personal items and then tell me I have no right to know what they are. That's not privacy. That's deception. We argued in circles for another hour, James maintaining that he had a right to privacy and that I was being controlling and invasive, me insisting that using joint funds for undisclosed personal purposes was a violation of our marital agreement, and that his refusal to explain was itself the problem. We reached no resolution. James eventually went back to work, and I sat alone in our house trying to process what had just happened and what it meant for our marriage. Over the following days, I did something I'd never done before in our 16 years together. I started investigating James's activities and finances. I felt guilty about it, like I was violating his privacy, but his refusal to be honest left me with no other way to understand what was happening. I went through his credit card statements more carefully, looking for other unusual charges. I found multiple smaller purchases from the same boutique over the past year, ranging from a few $100 to $1,000, all on his personal credit card that I normally didn't see. The pattern suggested this wasn't a one-time thing, but an ongoing behavior he'd been hiding. I looked up Discretion Boutique more thoroughly, exploring their website and product offerings. While they did carry some luxury bath products and robes, as James had mentioned, the vast majority of their inventory was intimate wear: lingerie, bodysuits, corsets, stockings, and sex toys and BDSM equipment. Their marketing clearly positioned them as a boutique for people exploring sexuality and kink, not as a general luxury gift store. The idea that James had spent $5,000 there on client gifts became even more absurd with this context. I found a private Instagram account on James's phone, one I didn't know existed, separate from his public professional account. It was locked and I didn't have the password, but seeing that it existed at all was another revelation. He was maintaining secret social media accounts, curating some version of himself that was hidden from me. When I asked him about it, he became defensive again, accused me of snooping, refused to show me what the account contained or who he was connected with there. The pattern was clear. James had been maintaining a secret life parallel to our marriage, funded partially with our joint money, hidden through lies of omission and evasion when directly questioned. The specifics of what that secret life entailed remained murky. I still didn't know exactly what he'd purchased or why, but the existence of systematic deception was undeniable. I consulted with a therapist, trying to understand what was happening and how to handle it. The therapist helped me see that James's refusal to answer direct questions was itself a form of lying, that choosing silence and evasion over honesty was a violation of our marital trust, regardless of what he was hiding. She helped me understand that I had a right to honesty in my marriage, that asking for transparency about joint financial expenditures wasn't controlling or invasive, that his framing of my reasonable requests as unreasonable demands was gaslighting. I gave James an ultimatum: full honesty about what he'd been spending money on and what aspects of his life he'd been hiding, or I would file for divorce. I didn't want to threaten divorce, didn't want our marriage to end, but I also couldn't continue in a relationship built on secrets and lies. James's response to the ultimatum was more silence and evasion. He said he needed time to think, that he wasn't ready to share everything, that he needed to work through some things on his own before he could talk to me about them. That response told me everything I needed to know. He was choosing his secrets over our marriage. He was prioritizing whatever he was hiding over the honesty required for a healthy relationship. 2 weeks after that conversation, I moved into our guest room. A month after that, I filed for divorce. The legal process took almost a year, complicated by asset division and James's attempts to hide certain financial information, fighting tooth and nail to maintain his secrets even as they cost him his marriage. The truth of what James had been spending money on emerged gradually through the divorce process, through financial discovery and his eventual forced disclosures. The $5,000 charge from Discretion Boutique had indeed been for lingerie and related items, but not for a client, and not exactly for another woman in the traditional affair sense. James had been involved in a sugar baby arrangement, paying a young woman for companionship and intimacy according to negotiated terms. The expensive lingerie and gifts were part of that arrangement. He'd been essentially maintaining a paid relationship with someone half his age, using our joint money to fund it. But that wasn't all. The financial investigation revealed that over the past 3 years, James had spent over $70,000 on this and similar arrangements. Multiple sugar babies, paid companions, escorts in cities where he traveled for work conferences. He'd been systematically living a double life, presenting as a successful married professional, while secretly paying for sexual and romantic experiences outside our marriage. Some of this money came from his personal accounts, but significant amounts, including that $5,000 charge that started everything, came from our joint account that was supposed to be for shared household expenses. What hurt most wasn't even the affairs themselves, though those were devastating. What hurt most was remembering that moment in our living room when I'd asked a simple, direct question and watched him choose evasion over honesty. The way he'd avoided my eyes, shifted his weight, delivered carefully constructed half-truths designed to satisfy me without actually revealing anything. The way he'd turned my reasonable questions into accusations of my being controlling. The way he'd walked out rather than have an honest conversation. All of those choices, in that moment and in the days and weeks that followed, revealed who James really was. Someone who valued his secrets more than our marriage, who prioritized avoiding discomfort over being honest with his partner, who would lie and manipulate rather than face consequences for his behavior. The $5,000 itself felt almost irrelevant by the time the full truth emerged. Yes, the money mattered. It was a significant amount, taken from joint funds without my knowledge or consent, used for purposes that violated our marriage. But what really destroyed our marriage wasn't the spending or even the affairs. It was the silence, the lies of omission, the deliberate choice to obscure and evade rather than admit and explain. Those silences, those carefully crafted non-answers, those moments when he looked away rather than meet my eyes, that was the real betrayal. During our divorce, James finally explained some of his reasoning. He claimed he'd been afraid to tell me the truth because he knew I'd be hurt and angry, that he'd gotten into these arrangements gradually over time, and by the time they were extensive, he didn't know how to confess without losing everything, that he'd convinced himself that what I didn't know wouldn't hurt me. He apologized for the lying and the evasion, claimed he wished he'd been honest from the beginning, said he understood now that the secrets had done more damage than the truth would have. I accepted his apologies, but they didn't change anything. The damage was done. Our marriage ended not because of one $5,000 charge, or even because of the multiple affairs and paid arrangements. It ended because when directly asked for honesty, James had chosen silence. When given opportunities to confess and rebuild on a foundation of truth, he'd chosen continued deception. When faced with a clear choice between his secrets and his marriage, he'd chosen the secrets. The divorce was finalized 14 months after that Wednesday afternoon when I first asked about the credit card charge. We sold our house and divided the proceeds. We split our other assets, with adjustments for the joint money he'd misappropriated for his secret life. We went our separate ways. James to continue his career and presumably his paid arrangements. Me to rebuild a life that had been shattered by discovery of systematic deception. The aftermath has been a process of reconstruction and reflection. I've had to examine my own role in the marriage's failure, not in causing James's affairs or deception, which were his choices and his responsibility, but in missing the signs, in accepting surface-level explanations, in not pushing harder for honesty when my instincts told me something was wrong. I've realized I'd been conflict avoidant in our relationship, accepting James's privacy claims without examining whether those claims were reasonable, maintaining my own separate life rather than building true intimacy with my spouse. I've also had to grapple with questions about what I knew and when I knew it. Looking back, there were signs I'd explained away. James's protectiveness about his phone and computer, his separate social media accounts, his frequent business dinners that I never asked about in detail, his lack of real interest in our sexual relationship despite maintaining what I now know was an active secret sexual life. I told myself these things were normal, that privacy in a marriage was healthy, that busy professionals often had separate lives that came together at home. But I'd also been willfully blind, choosing not to see because seeing would require uncomfortable conversations and potential conflict. The therapy I've done in the aftermath has helped me understand that relationships require radical honesty, not comfortable silence. That asking questions and expecting truthful answers isn't controlling. It's the minimum requirement for actual intimacy. That secrets about significant expenditures or activities aren't healthy privacy. They're deception that corrodes the foundation of partnership. I've learned to trust my instincts more, to push back against evasion and demand clarity, to recognize that silence in response to direct questions is itself an answer that tells me something important. I've started dating again, cautiously, with much more awareness of red flags, and much less willingness to accept non-answers to important questions. I ask direct questions about past relationships, about finances, about sexual history and preferences, about anything that might become a hidden wedge in a future relationship. Some men have found my directness off-putting, calling it invasive or aggressive. Those men don't get second dates. The men who appreciate honesty and reciprocate with their own openness and vulnerability, those are the ones I'm interested in building something with. I met someone new about 6 months ago, a man named David, who's also been through a divorce precipitated by a partner's hidden life and deception. We bonded over our shared experiences of betrayal and our mutual commitment to building relationships on complete transparency. We have conversations I never had with James, about our fears and insecurities, about our sexual needs and boundaries, about our finances and how we spend money, about anything and everything that could become a secret if left unspoken. David and I talk about that moment when I asked James about the credit card charge, about how his silence and evasion revealed more than any confession could have. David shared a similar story from his own marriage, asking his ex-wife about a pattern of absences and watching her construct elaborate explanations that never quite answered the actual question, realizing that the evasion itself was evidence of deception even before he knew specifically what she was hiding. We've made a commitment to each other that if we're ever asked direct questions, we'll give direct answers, even when those answers are uncomfortable or embarrassing or reveal things we'd prefer to keep private. We've agreed that uncomfortable truth is always better than comfortable lies. It's still early, and I don't know if my relationship with David will last or lead to something permanent. But I do know that it's built on a foundation of honesty that my marriage to James never had. I know that if I ask David a question, he'll answer it truthfully rather than evading and deflecting. I know that he values transparency over secrecy, that he understands silence in response to direct questions is itself a form of lying. That foundation makes everything different. The trust is deeper. The intimacy is more genuine. The relationship feels solid in ways my marriage never did. I think often about that Wednesday afternoon, about standing in my kitchen with a credit card statement, about asking a simple question and watching my husband choose silence over honesty. I've replayed that conversation hundreds of times in my mind, analyzing every pause, every word choice, every moment of eye contact avoided. What I understand now is that in those silences, in those carefully chosen non-answers, James was telling me everything I needed to know. He was showing me that he valued his secrets more than our relationship, that he prioritized avoiding consequences over being honest with his partner, that he was willing to sacrifice our marriage rather than face the discomfort of truth. The $5,000 became symbolic of something much larger, not just the money itself or what it was spent on, but the entire architecture of deception and hidden life that it represented. That single charge was the thread that, when pulled, unraveled years of lies and revealed a husband who was essentially a stranger, maintaining a secret life I'd known nothing about while presenting a facade of normal marriage. The money was real, and the affairs were real, but what destroyed our marriage was the silence, the lies of omission, the deliberate choice to obscure rather than reveal. If I could talk to my younger self, the woman who married James at 26, I would tell her to pay attention to how her partner responds to direct questions, to notice evasion and recognize it as a red flag, to understand that healthy privacy is different from deliberate secrecy, that partners who have nothing to hide don't respond to simple questions with defensiveness and deflection. I would tell her that silence can be the loudest confession, that what someone refuses to say often reveals more than what they do say. I would tell her that marriage requires complete honesty, even about uncomfortable topics, even about things we'd prefer to keep private, that the right to privacy in a marriage doesn't extend to significant expenditures of joint money, or to maintaining secret relationships, or to any behavior that fundamentally affects the partnership. I would tell her that asking questions and expecting truthful answers isn't controlling or invasive. It's the basic requirement for any healthy relationship. I would tell her to trust her instincts when something feels wrong, to push past dismissive explanations and demand clarity, to recognize that being made to feel crazy or unreasonable for asking questions is gaslighting. I would tell her that temporary discomfort from difficult conversations is always better than the long-term devastation of discovered deception. I would tell her that she deserves a partner who values honesty over comfort, who will tell her difficult truths rather than comfortable lies, who understands that real intimacy requires vulnerability, even when vulnerability is scary. Most of all, I would tell her that she deserves better than what she got. Better than a partner who maintained secret paid relationships for years. Better than someone who used joint money for personal indulgences without disclosure. Better than a husband who, when asked a direct question, chose silence and evasion over honesty. Better than 16 years invested in a marriage that was built on lies from its foundation. The ending of my marriage to James was painful and difficult, involving months of legal proceedings and financial negotiations and emotional processing. But it was also necessary and ultimately liberating. I'm free now from the weight of deception, from the exhausting work of trying to be intimate with someone who was fundamentally unavailable, from the confusion of living with someone who was essentially a stranger pretending to be a known partner. I have a new life now, one built on different foundations. I have a relationship with David that's based on honesty and transparency. I have friendships where I can be completely authentic. I have a career I'm invested in and proud of. I have a home that's mine alone, decorated to my taste, free from the presence of someone who is secretly living a parallel life. I have peace that comes from knowing the truth, however painful, rather than living in comfortable ignorance of deception. The $5,000 charge from Discretion Boutique was expensive, not just financially, but emotionally and relationally. It cost me my marriage, my sense of security, my belief that I knew my partner, but it also gave me something valuable: the truth, the knowledge of who James really was and what our marriage actually was, the understanding that silence in response to direct questions is itself an answer that tells me everything I need to know, the wisdom that came from experiencing deep betrayal and choosing to rebuild rather than become permanently cynical or closed off. I'm grateful now for that Wednesday afternoon, as strange as that sounds. Grateful that I saw the charge and asked the question. Grateful that James's response was evasive enough to make me investigate further. Grateful that the truth came out before more years were wasted on a marriage that was never what I believed it to be. The discovery was painful, but it was also necessary. The first step in a journey toward a life built on honesty and authenticity rather than comfortable deception. My name is Vanessa Chen. I'm 42 years old and divorced from a man who spent years maintaining secret paid relationships while married to me. I discovered his deception not through some dramatic revelation, but through a simple question about a credit card charge, a question he answered with silence and evasion that revealed more than any confession could have. What hurt most wasn't the $5,000, or even the affairs. It was the way he looked away when I asked for honesty, the carefully chosen non-answers designed to obscure rather than illuminate, the deliberate choice of secrets over transparency, silence over truth. That silence ended our marriage more surely than any affair could have, because it revealed that we were never actually partners in the way I'd believed, never actually intimate in the way marriage requires, never actually honest in the way love demands. We were two people maintaining parallel lives with minimal real connection, and when forced to choose between preserving that comfortable lie and embracing difficult honesty, James chose the lie. That choice made everything that followed inevitable: the divorce, the rebuilding, the long process of recovering from betrayal, and learning to trust again. I'm on the other side of that process now, building a life that's more authentic and relationships that are more honest. The journey was difficult, but worthwhile. The pain was real, but transformative. The ending of my marriage to James was the beginning of something better, a life where questions are answered truthfully, where silence isn't weaponized to hide deception, where honesty is valued over comfort. That life is the real gift that came from that Wednesday afternoon, from asking a simple question and learning that sometimes what isn't said matters more than what is. That silence can be the loudest confession, that the absence of honesty hurts more than any truth ever could. Thank you for reading my story. If this helped you recognize that evasion is a form of deception, or gave you courage to demand honesty even when truth is uncomfortable, Please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps me continue telling stories about the transformative power of truth and the devastating cost of silence.